Dexit is the fan coin term given to the intentional culling of over half of all Pokemon from the Sword and Shield Pokédex. And if you remember when this happened, then you probably remember the massive backlash from fans.
Where is it? Where's the rest?
Pokemon.
Skylar, where is the rest?
It got pretty bad. Now I'll be the first to admit that I was definitely one of those fans who was not the least bit pleased with this news. I was pretty heated. Now I've definitely mellowed out on how I feel about Dexit. I'm not nearly as mad, but that doesn't mean I think it was a good idea or anything. I still think that ultimately, sacrifices should have been made in order to include all of the Pokemon. Sword and Shield is honestly pretty bare bones. You would think that the games would be huge and expansive in order to justify not bringing back all the Pokemon, but they just aren't. It would have been an actual excuse if the games were as expansive as Scarlet and Violet. Those games are actually big enough that I would believe cutting Pokemon would have been necessary in order to achieve their vision. I still wouldn't like it, but it would be far more understandable. But instead, the sacrifice they made for Scarlet and Violet was the game functioning properly.
Where's his head, dude? Where's his head? And his legs, and his hands? What is this?
Helicopter, helicopter!
Now there are a lot of excuses that some fans come up with to defend Game Freak's decision to forget the catchphrase of the entire franchise. Some are better than others, but I'm just gonna go over the ones that I saw the most. Number 1. The excuse I saw the most by far was, all of the Pokemon could not possibly fit on one cartridge with how much bigger and graphically intensive Sword and Shield are. And this just doesn't make any sense. Ignoring the fact that Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise in the world, so they effectively have enough money to throw at any problem to fix it. Like I said, Sword and Shield just wasn't that much bigger. The graphics were like, fine, but I don't think you guys realize just how much bigger a Switch game is compared to a 3DS game. You're really trying to tell me that Sun and Moon could have like 800 Pokemon or whatever, but much more powerful hardware couldn't even stomach half of that? Besides, even if this is somehow a valid excuse, I do not believe that graphical fidelity is worth just forgetting about hundreds of Pokemon. Have you all been really playing the Pokemon games all these years for the graphics? A lot of fans believe that the series peaked graphically in 3rd gen. I don't think most people expect or care for Pokemon to be a huge graphical showcase. It's never been about that. And don't even get me started on the improved animations being the reason that all these Pokemon couldn't fit.
With its, it being much more powerful, allowing us to be much more expressive with each of the individual Pokemon.
Yeah, I don't really like liars. Tell the truth,
So no, I don't see this as a valid excuse. Excuse number 2. There's no need for all the Pokemon to come back, / there's too many Pokemon. So I guess everyone who had all of their favorites cut just don't matter? Is that kind of what we're saying here? Whether you believe it or not, the fact is that every single Pokemon is someone's favorite. You may think Bruxish is ugly and dumb, but someone out there loves Bruxish.
Well, of course I know it. It's me.
This is especially infuriating when people who say this are like, oh yeah, Charizard is my favorite, Lucario is my favorite, like the Pokemon who basically have a 0% chance of not being included in a mainline game. There's nothing wrong with having these as your favorite, but there is something wrong with having zero self-awareness and not understanding why some people are upset. So also, in my opinion, this is not a valid excuse. Number 3. They didn't have enough time to fit all the Pokemon. Well, this excuse has been disproven with the release of Scarlet and Violet, since they had plenty of time to develop those games. But if they didn't, the solution is so simple. Give them more time. The fact that so many games are coming out nowadays barely finished is proof enough that we need to give developers more time in general. Yeah, the Pokemon games have to come out in order to coexist alongside the anime, whatever, then just delay the anime. I don't get why this is such a big deal. It took forever for Scarlet and Violet to happen, so clearly it's not that big of a deal for the games to have a longer development cycle. This excuse is not valid, and it damages the entire industry to think this way. Now, for all of the excuses people come up with that are just not valid, there are at least a couple reasonings that I actually do think are at least somewhat valid. Number 1, game balancing. So I get this to an extent. If every single Pokemon is included in every game, then that means every broken Pokemon is also included. That means we will never be free of Landorus. So I can see where people are coming from when they say that this is the reason. But also, why not just change the ban list or something for competitive play? Like, they could have seasons throughout each generation where some Pokemon are allowed and others aren't, just to make sure the meta never stays the same so the competitive scene stays fresh. Sure, that doesn't solve the problem of non-VGC competitive play, but we do have Smogon tiers for a reason. But overall, I don't hate this excuse. And number 2. This is the most valid excuse of them all in my book. Game Freak just doesn't want to include all the Pokemon anymore. You know, at first, I hated this idea. I saw it as a slap in the face to the fans who love the Pokemon that are cut. But the more I think about it, the less I feel this way. Nobody can say that games that have limited dexes aren't unique experiences. Sword and Shield plays totally different compared to Sun and Moon. You have more limited options, so you're kind of forced to be more creative with your team composition, and this counts for your in-game team, your competitive team, and everything in between. Think about it, your favorites may have been cut, but because of that, you probably got new favorites that you love just as much now.
Come on, England!
As the biggest hater of nostalgia goggles, it absolutely drove me insane to see Legends Arceus come out, and then I keep seeing those "look at my Pokemon team" pictures and videos, and their team is just like the most generic 4th gen composition you could imagine. Like, cool bro, you have your starter, you have Staraptor, you have Luxray, you have Lucario, you have Garchomp, and you have Gastrodon. Real original. It's exciting to see longtime fans fall in love with different Pokemon that they never would have given a chance otherwise, and that sort of thing just won't happen if you don't cut their favorites. Even when Scarlet and Violet came out and I kept seeing everybody post their teams, there were still so many people that had Lucario, as if Lucario hasn't been on every single team you've used since Gen 4 came out. Now you may be saying, why do you even care what Pokemon other people are using? And that's fair, I really shouldn't care, and it's not necessarily that I actually care what you're using, it's more that I just think it's so lame to only use the same thing you've been using for like 10 plus years. It completely cuts down on creativity, and it also breeds this whole toxic, the old generations are better, so what's the point of the new generation outlook that a lot of people have. Whenever every generation comes out, and there's always people that are like, all these Pokemon are so ugly, it's just, are they really, or are you just nostalgic? I know some people who got Sun and Moon, but they didn't even bother to play the games until they got Pokébank functionality so that they can use their old favorites. And this concept is just insane to me. There are like 1,000 Pokemon and you're still gonna use the same 6 you've been using since like 2003? Come on. So with all of this being said, do I think that overall the choice to cut the national dex was a good one? No. I still don't, really. I still think that they should have just let all the Pokemon come back, but I can appreciate and respect Game Freak's decision to just shake things up. When you really think about it, it is kind of insane that the highest grossing franchise in the world would take such a risk like this. Like, imagine if the next Smash Bros. Game just got rid of half the roster and replaced them with completely different ones. The level of backlash would be insane, and the developers would have to know that beforehand. So for Pokemon to do this is pretty admirable. You gotta respect it. I have to imagine the boardroom meetings during this period were very, very heated. It's also kind of a fun experience now when they either announce a new game or announce that some Pokemon are returning in a DLC or something. Referring back to Smash Brothers, it's kind of like seeing a new Smash Brothers announcement, seeing who the returning characters are. It's pretty exciting. So as much as I wish I could still bring all of my favorites over into the new games, I definitely have a new level of appreciation and respect for Game Freak's decision to shave down the Pokédex. I still definitely understand people's frustration with this decision, but I also understand when people accept it. But I still do not understand you people that just accept this because Game Freak says so and you'll just accept anything the developers say. Like, that's just weird.
I love Pokemon.
And some of y'all are just extremely mean on Twitter. Like, I'm gonna need some of you to relax. In conclusion, I've started to see the whole Dexit thing kind of like seasons in Fortnite. Every season, there's new things added, and there's old things taken away. But that's also what keeps the game exciting and what keeps people coming back. Could you imagine if Fortnite was exactly the same way as it was when it came out? Yeah, I know there's some people that just never shut up about how much they love old Fortnite or old Call of Duty or whatever, but I think ultimately, you would find that if they just kept everything the same, you would get bored of it eventually. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you would be so kind as to like, subscribe, comment, all of that fun stuff that YouTubers always beg for people to do, I'm not above it, I'm gonna beg you to do the same. You can also follow me on other stuff like Twitter, TikTok. I also have a Discord. You could join the Discord. It's pretty fun in there. It's mostly just memes right now, but you know, if more people will join, maybe it could be cooler. Who knows? Whatever. Anyway, again, thank you for watching.